The Bobby O Show.
Welcome to the Bobby O Show. My name is Bob O. Potsner, and I have a super special show for you today. I have for you today a guest who has been one of the leading activists, volunteers, community of enthusiasts from Richfield, Connecticut, Barbara Manners, who is currently a selectman on the board. She's been there for 29 years, and she has a whole lot of things more she has done for our community, including starting a new newspaper called the Richfield Herald. So we have a lot to talk about with Barbara Manners. Barbara, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I've heard so much about the show over the years. So I'm delighted that you invited me to be a guest.
It's my pleasure. And you know, there's so many things that you've done for our town that I don't even know where to start, but I'm going to start in the beginning. Okay? I'm going to talk first about the fact that you are a lawyer, graduated from Fordham Law School,
Right.
NYU undergraduate. Tell me a little about yourself growing up. Where'd you grow up, et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, I grew up in New York City on East 74th Street in Manhattan. I grew up in a townhouse that I lived in with my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt. And all of whom worked. And I went to a Jewish day school called Ramaz.
Like Camp Ramah?
No, it's Ramaz.
Ramaz?
And today, I believe it's a much more religious school than it was then. But it was an Orthodox.
Grew up Orthodox.
It was an Orthodox Jewish day school. So I learned Hebrew and I learned English. I hope.
How about Yiddish? A little Yiddish?
Only a little.
Only a little. Only a tickle. Okay.
And that was mostly from my grandmother. My grandmother and my mother, if they didn't want me to understand, would talk in Yiddish.
That's correct.
I grew up there for most of my early years. My mother worked for my grandmother, and then at one point she decided it was time to break away, and we moved to Miami Beach for a year.
Really?
And I spent my 4th grade year in Miami Beach, and my mother decided that it wasn't wise to keep us there given the education there. She was very concerned since most of what I learned in 4th grade there was a repeat of what I had learned in 2nd grade back at Ramaz. So she resigned from her job. They wouldn't accept her resignation, and they gave her a transfer back to New York. And so we went back to live with my grandmother again for a few years, and my mother worked for Revlon.
Oh, really?
And she worked for Revlon for 28 years, and she became the first woman vice president. She had to wait till after Charles died because Charles Revson, who was the president of Revlon, and one of the founders, Martin and Charles, didn't believe that women should be in leadership positions. This is a man who sold cosmetics and beauty to everybody, but he didn't believe that women should be at the top.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I was going to ask you, you grew up with your grandmother, your mother, and your aunt, I think you said, in New York City. And these are 3 strong ladies, the way you describe them, and you're a strong woman of substance in our community. Tell me the influence that those 3 ladies had and who you've become.
Oh, well, my grandmother was a very strong lady. She was She owned a pharmacy that my mother worked in for a number of years. My grandmother had 4 daughters, and she made sure that each one of them not only went to college, but had a master's degree in something. My mother was a disappointment initially because she got married at 21 and went off with my father. But by the time I had arrived, she had come back to New York, and she went to Columbia to get her.
Some disappointment, huh?
Yeah, to get her master's in education, because that was what Grandma insisted on.
And Columbia is known for a great education program.
Yes, yes. So she got her master's in education, and another of my aunts was a lawyer, and another was a pharmacist, and another was a social worker. So they were all of my grandmother's children worked and were strong women. My mother may have been the strongest. My mother was a very dominant force in my life. When she was young, she was a student leader, and that could be a whole show, because she, as a student leader, she was invited to spend a summer at Campobello. She met Mrs. Roosevelt. She became friendly with Mrs. Roosevelt. She stayed at the White House.
This is the 40s Roosevelt, not the 2000s,
Yes,
1910s.
this was she was
FDR.
at she stayed at the White House. She was at the White House, not the day war was declared, but that month. She actually stayed there because she was in town, and Mrs. Roosevelt invited her to come stay. And so they had a relationship that went on for years, quite distant. I mean, not a lot of correspondence and stuff. So that was my mother's background. I mean, you know, how many mothers have had dinner sitting next to Winston Churchill?
And maybe some little schnapps, perhaps.
Well, we won't.
I want to ask you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, he certainly could hold his liquor.
It certainly could. You talked about your mother being involved in politics, and is that sort of why you got involved in politics?
No.
Unrelated to. Unrelated to.
Unrelated to it. I didn't get involved in politics. Well, I mean, I grew up during the Vietnam War. So yes, I got involved in politics because I was against the war. And I went to work for the Fifth Avenue Peace Parade Committee, which was
Wow.
the group that organized all the demonstrations in Washington and in New York against the war. And we were the logistics provider. I mean, we would provide 100 buses for,
Oh, wow.
you know, and people would rent them from us and stuff like that to go to Washington. It was a very active group. And so yes, I mean, I got involved in politics at that age. But once the war was over, I mean, I went to law school thinking I could change the world. But by the time I got out of law school, it was 1973, and the war was pretty much over.
Yeah.
And so I went to work for a law firm up in Rochester, New York.
Which is a very Jewish community up in Rochester. I
They
happen
have
to
a
have
very
relatives.
strong Jewish
Right.
community, yes. And I worked for a firm where maybe I was the only Jew. I worked for a firm that was
Maybe the only woman also, maybe, perhaps, in 1970.
well, there were 2 of us or 3 of
But-
us, and there was one woman partner. It was called Nixon, Hargrave, Devens, and Doyle.
Which Nixon was that? Not that Nixon.
No. It was Rochester's premier law firm. It has since expanded to many other places. But I was the only unmarried person in the firm. There were 100 lawyers, and I was the only unmarried person. It was a difficult situation to be in. It was uncomfortable. In those days, social life centered around the country clubs. There was the Jewish Country Club, the Catholic Country Club, and the WASP Country Club. And then, oh my God, what really got me, and what precipitated my leaving, actually, was the firm scheduled their Christmas party at the Chatterbox Club. It was the women's club. The Chatterbox Club? Excuse me?
Enough said, enough said. It's interesting because I first became a lawyer in 1978, and there were some female judges, but that was the era where Margaret Driscoll was a judge in Bridgeport, for example, and that's an era where she was the only judge, and Judge Patricia Geen was in Danbury, and so you're talking about an era when women started. Don't forget, Yale didn't go co-ed where I went undergraduate, despite the Duke Law basketball stuff, until 1967. So things have changed, although now, without getting political, it may be going backwards with what's going on in terms of the anti-women movement that's being by the Trump administration. We're not doing that for today, but you can see things maybe sort of turning the wrong way.
Yes. Well, we've come full circle.
In a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, and not for the best.
Why law school for you?
Why law school? I was a history major, and I had gotten my master's in history. And I didn't really want to go and get a PhD in history. And there was no question in my grandmother's mind that I had to be a professional. I wasn't very good at science, so I didn't become a doctor, I became a lawyer. Rather than an Indian chief.
Well, you're going to laugh because when I went to Yale, I went as a pre-med student. But I was always a poli-sci major. And I held off organic chemistry until my junior year because I said, I'm not taking organic until I know for sure I want to become a doctor. And I said I didn't want to become a doctor. And I said I didn't want to be around sick people my whole life. So I became a lawyer, and I'm around sick lawyers all the time. But it's interesting because being Jewish myself, in our generation, you either were going to be a doctor or a lawyer or accountant or what else is there else to be in the world?
That's right.
You know? So how did we get to Richfield, Connecticut from Rochester, New York? And don't tell me by train. How did you get? I'm very fond of Rochester because I have relatives who live up there, and my cousin, who was brilliant, got the Bashalom Scholarship, which in Rochester was a big 5-year program. In fact, when I got into Yale, I was shocked because my cousin didn't get into Yale, went to Andrew Ward High School, and he was 800 in math and whatever, but he got the Bashalom. So, and that's through Rochester.
Through Rochester.
Yeah, and so, and I've been up there many times, and I was shocked at how many Jews there are. And in fact, I went to his son's wedding. It was an Orthodox Jewish wedding, the typical one where you have the men in one room, the women in the other room, and that kind of stuff. Did that bother you as an Orthodox Jewish girl, young lady, when you had the separations and you had to sit in one spot?
And the men in another.
Yeah.
It did bother me, and it's part of the reason that I'm no longer Orthodox.
Equality is a very important thing. So you went to law school because it was sort of your grandmother's input, but what kind of,
I went to law school because I mean, there was no question that you had to be a professional of some kind in my family. And I mean, the law was my Aunt Selma, my mother's older sister, had been a lawyer way back. I mean, in like the 30s and 40s. And I loved constitutional law. It was a course I took in college, and so I think because of constitutional law and my love for the First Amendment, I decided to be a lawyer. And I thought maybe I could come out and do some good in the world. I discovered that doing good in the world is very difficult, but I learned that you can do good in a small community.
Yeah, and I'll get to that in a second. You know, it's interesting. When I went to Duke Law School, Duke was a small class, 150 kids in our class, and everyone had large sections, which at a school that small was maybe 75 people, whatever. But we all had one small section class, which was where a writing class was. And I happened to get First Amendment with a great Professor Lang, I think has passed away, was a great professor in constitutional law. So the first case I read was New York Times versus Sullivan. And she's smiling because she knows that was the seminal case in First Amendment and
Right.
other cases like the Bobby Dodds case, other cases like that. And somehow now the First Amendment only means if you're a Republican, you get First Amendment rights. If you're a Democrat, we don't get it. And I don't know how, but I remember always enjoying and studying First Amendment. In fact, one of my buddies, people talk about in law school how you have your study groups. Mm-hmm. Well, a guy from Yale went down, I knew him very well, we broadcast on the Yale radio station before we went to Duke, and he and I were our study group. He ended up being number one in my class. And so every day, after I played basketball, every day after going to classes, we would talk on the phone with the case of the day, whatever. He became number one. Then he went to William & Mary as a professor and was the first Bill of Rights section, whatever. So I've always had this devotion. He wrote a book about Larry Flynt, and he sent me which was a very interesting case, and he sent me an autographed book. So first, you and I have that in common, and even though you're not practicing law now, I've observed you when I was in the Board of Education in Richfield and had a charter revision committee, and you were doing work on the Playhouse. I saw you negotiating the contract between the city, between the town and the Playhouse, and you were a pretty fierce negotiator, Attorney Manners, I will say to you.
Well, and I still use my law. I use my law. Actually, when I founded Chirp, the summer concert series that I do in Richfield, 25 years ago, I discovered that artists have contracts when they come to perform for you. And I wasn't going to hire a lawyer to review the contracts because I didn't have the money for that. And so, you know, I read every contract that comes in, and they're not always just standard routine contracts. And I will negotiate with the agent on certain points, depending on you know, what the issue is and how much we want the artist to be there, because sometimes you give a little to get what you want. But I use my law that way. I use my law on the Board of Selectmen.
Sure. When I was on the Board of Education, even though I was never the board's lawyer, we always hired outside counsel.
Right.
When I was on the Board of Ed, we had, remember Frank D'Angelo? He was a computer expert. So whenever there's a computer issue came up, we'd ask him. Remember Kitty Fisher?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay, she was on the Board of Ed with me also. She was a professional educator, so sometimes we'd defer to her, and because I'm a lawyer, they would defer to me not to make the decision, but because to picking the brain. Maureen
Right.
Kozlark, who's on the Board of Selectmen with you now, was a real estate person. And so all these different expertise came in, so I can see using that. Let's go back to the Playhouse, because I want to save a lot of time for the new newspaper, but I'm going to do a little bit of background first. The Playhouse, tell me how that idea developed, the Richfield Playhouse.
Oh my. Well, there were a group of 5 people. Steve Zemo was one.
A philanthropic guy.
Very,
Very.
very philanthropic. Jeannie Cook, who was the president of the Ridgefield Symphony at the time, Ruthie Leibowitz,
Oh, Ruthie Leibowitz. Boy, she was dedicated.
and she was a committed drama teacher and very involved in the town and with youth. And there was James Fayette.
Don't know James.
James Fayette ran Paris Salon. He was a
Oh,
hairdresser.
okay. I've never been to Paris Salon, obviously, with this here, or lack thereof.
And I'm having a senior moment, unfortunately, because there was the select woman who preceded me.
Sue Manning.
No, Sue Manning was the first select woman.
Oh, a select person.
One of her daughters was Jessica, who owned the Ancient Mariner.
Oh, okay. I know you're thinking, it'll come to you.
It'll come to me eventually, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It
But
happens.
the group of people got together
got together.
in the 1990s, more or less, right? 1990s?
It was 1994 or so.
Yeah, because I was on Board of Ed first in 1997, and there was negotiations about the room, so it's right around that time frame.
Right, and the Playhouse, or what was an auditorium at that time, an old school auditorium, was vacant. The building was pretty vacant.
It was the old high school.
It was the old high school, and the Ridgefield, the Village Theater or whatever, the one movie house we had in town had closed. So there was a hunger for a venue that could show movies and that could do things. And I was involved in Maimonides, the school my son was going to. I had started an after-school program there because they had none. And I knew that there were parents who worked. And so I started an after-school program. And one of the people I hired was Ruthie Leibowitz.
Ah.
And Ruthie came to me one day and said, there's a group of people who I want you to meet. She said, I just want you to meet and talk to them. So I agreed to have lunch. Jeremy Wilmot.
Yes.
Jessica Wilmot's her daughter, and yes. Jeremy Wilmot, who was this amazing lady, very strong force, and she was on the board of selectmen. She was a Democrat, and then she became non-affiliated, I would say, because she certainly wasn't an independent in the sense of our independent party.
Sure.
I sat down with them at lunch one day, and they talked to me about the Playhouse, about the desire for a place, about the old auditorium, and they asked me to please come see it. And Jeremy took me on a tour of the old auditorium. And when I stood in the balcony, and they talked to me from the stage, I just knew the acoustics there.
It's amazing acoustics there, unbelievable acoustics there.
It really is. And so I said, I don't know anybody in town, and they said, that's good. They were all involved in the community and felt that they were too prominent to be the grassroots leader of this effort, and they didn't have the time. They all had their busy schedules. So I said, okay, I'm in, and there was I got together a group of people, though they helped me get together a group of people who were interested, because I didn't know anybody at that time really, other than the Maimonides parents. We got together this group of very talented people, Madeline Jelinek, who was a designer, an interior designer, and Richard Pilbrow, who was world famous as the founder of Theater Projects, and who had written, and I think it's still used, the textbook on lighting for students. And he lived in Ridgefield, wouldn't you know? And so Theater Projects got involved, and Bob Jones, who was a senior vice president at George Wein, who had been producing the Newport Jazz and Folk Festival for umpty years.
So you found a village of which you were the leader of, or you're the glue, let's say the glue.
I was the glue or the guru or the...
the macher. That's a Hebrew name.
Yeah, that's a Yiddish word.
Thank you. We both know that one.
And we all, worked on this, and we commissioned a feasibility study through Theater Projects, and found that the community was ripe.
It was very ripe, because I had just come to town around that time.
Yes, it was very ripe. But the first select woman didn't believe that we should turn it into a playhouse or that she should rent it to us. She wanted to rent it to a commercial space. She wanted money, revenue, and so we had a battle, and in the end, we got together a petition from over 1,000 citizens that we wanted to bring this to a referendum, and she said no. She had the in-house lawyer that we had at the time. We had an in-house counsel.
Right.
And she had him declare the petition not valid, invalid. So, what do you do?
You keep fighting, that's what you do.
You keep fighting. Well, she was up for re-election. And so I went to the Democratic Town Committee, which was my first introduction to them, and said, I will run against her. Even though I can't win, I will run against her. Because, God damn it, excuse me.
That's okay. I've heard that word before.
This should be a no-brainer. And so I ran against her. I lost, but I lost by a very small amount.
I remember that election. Is that 1997?
Yes.
That's when I first got involved on the Board of Ed.
Well, it was 1995.
95, so that's right before I got there. It's funny because I filled a spot from a lady who was on the Board of Education, and I was only in town for several months. And I said, no one's going to know me. They heard that I had been on the Board of Ed in a prior town.
In Shelton.
Right, in Shelton. So I said, how am I going to run? So I said, here's my campaign mantra. To not know me is to like me. To not know me is to like me. You could have had that one tonight. But so you ended up turning things around. I remember you talking about money, that there was negotiation because the Board of Ed facility got, you took some space away from us for what you needed. And I remember there was like a lease that was like $1 a year, something like that, that was negotiated. And I'm thinking as you're telling the story, how we have made in this town, if they charge you $10,000 a month, we've made 10 times that from the restaurants, from the travel, all that kind of stuff. So what a brilliant thing. And as I said to you offline before we started the show today, no matter where I go, if I mention Richfield, Connecticut, people say, oh, I've been to the Playhouse. I've been to the Playhouse, and I've seen some phenomenal people. Do you know, here's a trivia question. I had Allison Stockel, former executive director of the Playhouse for many years, on my show many times. Do you know who the most famous person was who almost came to the Playhouse but didn't come? Do you know who I'm going to think of? Ringo Starr.
Oh my, okay,
She told me
because I know Paul Simon came.
He came, but Ringo Starr, Allison told me in our show, that he was going to come, and the only reason he didn't come, forgetting the $200,000 or whatever it was, he wanted a lot of money to come,
Right.
The stage wasn't big enough, and he wouldn't come without his whole band. But that's the kind of national recognition. I've seen Selton Foster there.
Oh, Levon Helm played there.
Jeff Daniels, Collins. Judy Collins was there.
Judy
who
Collins
lived in
was
Ridgefield.
there. Yes, she was.
And you know, who's your like most famous person you enjoyed? You don't want to pin them out, but give me a couple of names you really enjoyed at the Playhouse.
Well, I am stuck with my music that I most love back in the late 60s with Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell.
And I loved Carly Simon. And
Did they ever come to the Playhouse?
no.
No, they did not. You know, I had on my show, many shows ago, I did a show with the first woman who ever played in the Whiffenpoofs, which is the Yale a cappella sing group. Yale started in 1909 for Whiffenpoofs, but women didn't come to 1967. And Sophia Campanora in 2019, why so long it took, was the first woman on the Whiffenpoofs, and she sat in that corner and she played some music that she had written, and I also did the Whiffenpoofs the following week. So you and I have a great love for different kinds of music. But
And Richie Havens came to
Richie Havens.
He came to the Playhouse, and Joan Baez came to the Playhouse once.
All we were saying is give peace a chance. I heard Joan Baez on a great podcast. I'm a big fan of some of the podcasts that we have, and Nicole Wallace is one of my favorites. And she had Joan Baez, and Joan Baez was comparing what it's like in the 60s to now. And she said, unfortunately, now is worse, but that's another conversation. I want to transition to a couple of things because I want to get into the newspaper. Just briefly, Chirp. How did Chirp develop?
Well, okay.
For those who don't, Chirp is a concert series, like for Memorial Day, more or less. In fact, the next show, the first show there will be May 26th.
Right, next Tuesday is the first show, and we open, for the last 3 years, we've opened with the high school orchestra playing.
Jazz band, or what kind of?
Well, this year it will be the jazz band and the Pops Orchestra. Last year it was the Ridgefield Concert Orchestra.
High school kid. I love the music. My son Matt, who played varsity football at Ridgefield High School, but was in the jazz band. And the high school, when he went, I don't know if it's still the case, instead of taking gym because you're an athlete, whatever, he could take the jazz band class and got a credit every year for 4 years in being in the jazz band. And he played musicals. In fact, Maureen Kozark, your fellow select person's daughter, Catherine Kozark, I think it was Catherine Kozark, was in a show, I think Anything Goes with Matt. And when Matt would play, all the football guys would come, so what are you doing there? They used to call him Op. But it brings the town together.
Oh, it does.
And it was it's amazing.
Okay, so I started Chirp because I had left the Playhouse. The Playhouse had opened, and after about 4 months of running it, I decided I was better off leaving after, you know, I had birthed it, and now it was time for somebody else to raise the child that I had birthed.
You need a new nanny.
It needed a new
nanny.
Right. It took a few years, but then they got Allison Stockel.
Who was wonderful.
Oh my God, I could have never dreamed of raising a child that successfully as she raised the Playhouse. She was amazing. And she is amazing. She's still amazing. She's now down in Florida with another performing arts center.
Oh, she's doing that now? I was supposed to have her on a show about 6-8 months ago. She was coming back to Connecticut, but something happened and she couldn't get on the show. But I'm still trying to get her back on because what she did, her creativity, it was the people she got here because she has so many contacts.
Yes, yes. Well, you know, her uncle was at Preservation Hall. I mean, they founded Preservation Hall, I understand, and so the Preservation Hall Jazz Band comes to Ridgefield to play every year, and yes, and Allison had been in TV production before she came to Ridgefield, and Allison is a treasure beyond words, and I was very sorry to see her move away, but she still is very connected. She was back here Saturday night for the opening of Dear Evan Hansen at ACT.
Okay.
And because she is very connected to everything in the arts in Ridgefield.
Sure, sure.
And so.
So you left the Playhouse.
so I left the Playhouse. I was a select woman by that time.
Only for 29 years.
Only,
Yeah.
well, it wasn't 29 years then.
Okay, well, it's 29 years now.
It's 29 years now. I was a select woman, and 9/11 happened. And 9/11 happened the Tuesday before my son's bar mitzvah. And I was, oh my God, what do I do? And I called the rabbi, and I said,
Rabbi Haddon?
Rabbi Haddon, and I said, what am I doing? How do I go forward with this party? And he said to me, life events we don't cancel. You make it happen. You go forward, you live every day. So we went forward, and we had my son's party. And at the party, we had a DJ. We didn't have a band, but we had a DJ and a lot of music. And people were dancing. And it was like this big release after a week of such tension. And I thought to myself, and there were people from very different persuasions at my son's bar mitzvah, because I was involved at this point in local politics.
I think my son Matt may have been at that bar mitzvah.
He may have been.
I think he may, because he and David were friends.
Yes.
By the way, David happens to be a very good lawyer. I had to sneak that in for a minute.
Thank you.
He's a very good lawyer.
Thank you very much. I'm very proud of my son.
Yeah, I just saw him the other day, and he could be on my show for a 3-hour show.
Yes. Yes, he could.
So that was
He also could put you to sleep. But he doesn't. He is very stimulating. So
you had the bar mitzvah.
At the bar mitzvah, I thought to myself, this is a release for people. This is a way to bring people together. And the next week, I went to Rudy, who was the first selectman then.
Rudy Marconi.
Who was first selectman, and he was in his first term. And I said to him, I want to start a series of free concerts in the park, because the best way to get people out, and they're scared at the moment, everybody's in their house.
We didn't know what's going to happen.
We didn't know what was going to happen. People were canceling their subscriptions to things. People were afraid, and I said the best way to get people out is to do free music in the park and bring the community together. And he said, great idea, how are you going to fund it, et cetera. And so I went to Paul Roche, who was the director of Parks and Rec then,
Yep.
and I told Paul about it, and Paul said, Paul was a person who didn't ever see a problem. He only saw an opportunity. He was amazing. And he said, we can do this. We can get some equipment from here, and we can get some equipment from there, and we can put it together, and we can make it happen. You just take care of the artists and stuff like that. And I went, then from there I went to Tom Nash, who was the editor of the Ridgefield Press. And I said, listen, Tom, I want to start a series of concerts in the park. And I don't have the money to pay for advertising or anything. Would you consider being the sponsor of the show, the series? And he said, absolutely. And he gave me advertising space every week. And at that time, the Ridgefield Press was a substantial paper.
Which will tie into our story next.
It was a substantial paper, and I was able to write about each band that was coming. I was able to start 3 weeks before they came and write a story each of the 3 weeks until they came, with a limitation on words. In the beginning, it was 500 words. Later on, it got to be 300 words. And they gave me free advertising. I could do free ads every week. So with the support of the press as the underwriter for the advertising. They didn't give me money, but they gave me,
Which is worth something.
right, it was worth a
But
lot.
all this started from your son's bar mitzvah in 9/11. I have an interesting story for you on my side. My daughter, Jessica, was supposed to get married, and COVID hit. And we had planned a big wedding at 180, 200 people, whatever it's going to be, at the Madison Beach Hotel in Madison, Connecticut. Then COVID hits. So we're saying, well, what are we going to do? So I said, look, if we can't have that bar mitzvah, we'll have 13 people in our front yard. We have a big front yard. And we can do that. And she said, well, we'll try that, but I'd rather go for this big wedding, so let's postpone the wedding to November. I said, what happens if in November it's cold and you can't go outside? We'll have it outside anyway. I said, no, 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 no. She said, you know what, Dad? We're going to have the wedding on our front yard for 13 people. We actually have a big stone wall in front, and 25 of our friends were on that side because my wife would not let people on this side. Got a tent, and her father-in-law, they're not Jewish, but he built a chuppah for us.
Oh.
And I was the JOP, Justice of the Peace, and so we had it. And so the point of the story is that Jessica has always said that was the best wedding. So just like your son's bar mitzvah, and the Rabbi Haddon said, you don't cancel big events.
Right.
That's what happens. So sometimes, let's make lemonade out of lemon.
Yeah, that's right.
So now, with that transition, we're going to transition now to the Richfield newspaper, the one
Yes.
called the Richfield Herald. And I want to say to you, having been on the Board of Education for many years, being head of charter revision, you need a local newspaper, from my perspective, for a couple reasons. One is to get the news out of what's going on, but also to keep the politicians on the right path. So if you say something stupid, for example, or insensitive at a meeting, it's got to come out. Now, of course, we have things. We now have videos of the events, et cetera. But it's not like having newspapers out there doing their job.
It's not a central source for information.
And so, unfortunately,
That's what newspapers were.
Right, and if you watch The Riflemen, you still in the old series, you have the newspapers that are important. Unfortunately, for whatever reasons, economics, whatever, our papers are merging. The local papers now are, 85% national and maybe a little bit whatever. And so you have now begun a process of trying to get a new newspaper. And I want to read the mission statement, and I'm going to transition
Okay.
for that because I do my homework. I'm not coming to a show with Barbara Manners without doing my homework. Even when I was on the Board of Ed, I always had my homework, right? I always did it.
Yes, you did. You
Always.
were always prepared.
Thank you. Mission statement, and this I got online. The Richfield Herald, that's the name you're going to use. The Richfield Herald has been established to serve Richfield with locally focused journalism, like we said, that objectively and accurately covers all facets of life in our community. The Herald is committed to reporting on cultural events, town board and commission meetings, local sports, the schools, life milestones from births to obituaries, and other notable stories related to Richfield and its people. Success in its mission will depend upon the community. Richfield's active participation will make the newspaper of the community, by the community, and for the community. When I did some research on what you're
Actually,
doing.
For community. I don't have the dot in there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Of the community, by the community, and for the
For
community. For community, not the community. Sort of like a portrait of the artist of a young man, not the portrait. A little Ulysses. Sorry, throw that in.
Right, but also for community, it's to build a community. It isn't just for the people in the community.
Correct, correct. So tell me, how'd you get involved in this wonderful venture?
Well, everybody, I mean, I shouldn't say everybody, but everybody that I know has been distressed for quite some time that there has been no local newspaper. And the Ridgefield Press, which was a wonderful paper at one time, was acquired by Hearst, and they stripped it of its reporters and finally of its editor, and they started feeding the stories from their daily newspaper, the News Times, into the Ridgefield Press. And And that's what the Ridgefield Press has become. I don't think there's been a reporter from the News Times at a meeting in quite some time.
Used to be every meeting.
The press covered every meeting. Mac Reed was always there. There is, I think they get the tapes. I mean, and somebody listens to the tapes and they may summarize it, and if they find something interesting, they'll write a small article and it'll get transferred after it appears in the News Times. It'll get transferred over to the Ridgefield Press. But no local sports, no notices of galas coming up or of organizations in town needing volunteers, like the Rides for Ridgefield and Meals on Wheels and Sphere. Ridgefield is a town of volunteers. People are so community oriented, and they want to help. And they didn't know how. I mean, people were losing touch with each other. When the referendums on the public safety building failed, both the first and the second, we had meetings as the board with the public to ask why. What was the reason you voted it down? And there were valid reasons that some people didn't like the location, some people were concerned about the traffic, some people were concerned about the expense, but overwhelmingly, we found people saying there was no communication. We didn't know about it. We, as a board, had been working on it for years.
Wait a minute, years. A.J. DiMattia, when I first came,
Yes.
when I first came to Ridgefield back in '96, I think that was one of the first.
Yes.
Maybe not, but then.
A.J. DiMattia, yes.
DiMattia, who was so passionate about this. I remember going to board meetings saying, "Yes, we need it." I think it's got to be like 2000, 1999, whatever, way back then.
It was way back.
And we still, and the facility we have a great police force, but my God, are you kidding me? It's a shanda, another word.
Right.
I don't know, I couldn't believe, in fact, I tried to get a show with the police chief and the fire chief, and I just couldn't get the connection time-wise to put it on, but it's a shame that didn't go down. So you're saying the lack of communication was a problem?
The lack of communication, it was, and we had held public information sessions. There were about 14 public information sessions at the library and other places that people could have come to, and presentations were made, but people didn't know about it. They didn't know it was even happening. And it was at that point that I said, okay, this is enough. We have to start our own newspaper. And so here I am. I talked to some people who said, yes, it's a great idea. I talked to one woman, Susan Clark, over in Reading, who runs the Reading Sentinel, and who started that about 4 years ago now, on a shoestring, and has made a success of a local independent paper.
And it's hard to do that. It's very hard.
It's very hard to do that, but she has made a success. I mean, she doesn't make money, but we're not looking for money. We're looking to break even. So we need advertisers, clearly, and I haven't gotten to that point yet where I'm out asking people for money, but I need to be to help produce the paper. But I went and hired an editor, Paul Steinmetz, who had been at the News Times years ago and was very well respected and known, and asked him if he would take on the editorship of this paper it's not a full-time job at this point, it's a part-time job. And he agreed to do it, which is wonderful. And I went to Jack Sanders.
He was the editor.
He was the editor of the Ridgefield Press for 45 years, practically.
When I came to town, that's where he was.
Yeah, he
ran a tough ship. He ran a tight ship, and
he was an incredible editor.
yeah.
I went to Jack Sanders, and I went to Jeff Morris, who was actually on the Board of Selectmen with me, but who had started the magazine that became 0687. He eventually sold it, but it was Ridgefield Magazine at the start, and then it became 0687. And they had publishing experience because I had none.
You had an idea, a theme.
And I said to them, will you be editorial advisors to the paper? And they said yes. So that was the crux. Once I had the editor and I had these editorial advisors, I went out and found a printer, and I started working on letting groups know that we were interested in hearing from them.
Barbara, we have 2 minutes left in the show. I told you to go very fast. We may have you back again soon when the paper's almost coming out. But tell me, how close are you to having the first issue coming out? Are we
June
July?
17th.
June 17th.
June 17th. We're hoping that by June 17th, it will be in everybody's mailbox.
So you're going to mail it to people initially?
Initially, for the first 3 months, we intend to mail to the entire community for free. After that, it will become a subscription, and we're hoping that by January of 2027, it can be a weekly.
And this is really important for those of you who are listening and live in Ridgefield or any small town. It is critical to have a paper that devotes itself to your issues. Even though I'm interested in what's going on in Wilton and Reading and Weston, whatever, I live in Ridgefield. And I think it's very important for us to all get behind this concept. And I was reading something, I think that if you have something to write about that you want to put in the paper, they might consider it in the Ridgefield Herald.
Absolutely. We're looking for stories. We're looking for people to write about incredible experiences they've had, travels that they've taken that they think would be of interest to us, successes that they've achieved, their achievements.
And that's part of what I try to do in my shows.
We want to hear about the sports.
Yeah, and I try to do that. I had these 2 young ladies from Ridgefield High School who are nationally recognized women's lacrosse players. One of them, Grace Winkler, and the other was Gabby Labatini. Grace like number 4 in the country, and Gabby's like number 25, and they got scholarships to UNC Chapel Hill. Boo, Chapel Hill, but that's okay. We had them on this show twice, and they are world famous. I'm not sure if I've seen too much in the newspapers about them. Barbara Manners, it has been a pleasure having the hour, actually 58 minutes. The hour has gone by so fast. I want to tell you that I support what you're trying to do with the newspaper. We all should do that. And we should be so successful with the newspaper as you have been with Chirp.
Thank you.
And the Playhouse.
And that's all I can wish for.
And I want to say Mishi Berach for your family.
Thank you.
Okay, it's a Hebrew prayer for healing. This has been Bobo Potsner with the great Barbara Manners. Thank you very much. And this edition of the Bobby O Show. Be well, shalom, which means hello, goodbye, and peace.
Peace.